Morning, everyone. So welcome back, everyone. Great to see you here. Great, I've got the chat open now. Just make sure when you're using the chat that you're sending it to everybody. So today we're very lucky. We have Hafez presenting today. So Hafez is passionate about and experienced with road safety and sustainable mobility. He's got over 22, I didn't want to say how many years. I think I should 50 years. But anyway, I've just got in there. Anyway, his expertise is in road safety, injury prevention, research, transport planning, and
Do you have anything against my age?
I'm just like, I don't know. Do we need these years? Anyway, he really knows he's got a very strong background and a PhD in the fields of road safety as a key contributor to planning, developing, and delivering the Victorian government's Towards Zero strategy and action plan, amongst other national and international road safety strategies. I call Hafez when I need to know something in the big picture about road safety. I think the last one was me asking you about children's road safety statistics, and it was great. I got an answer on the spot, and I was like, been passing that information on, those little snippets of information that can help guide you at that strategic planning level. So I think that's what is a wonderful gift to the industry, and all Hafez's knowledge and experience can be wound up in that 2-minute conversation that gives you a crucial piece of information that you can start targeting your kind of interventions around. So Hafez will be talking to us today, and I am going to hand over and look forward to the ride. So as usual, get in the chat and ask any questions. We'll keep that going, and every so often I'll just put the brakes on Hafez so we can get those questions in.
Yeah, and also, Pro, usually I introduce you because we have changed the order. And I want to say that I have learned so much from you, not just from your knowledge, but also from the way you look at things and the way you question the paradigms. So it's great to have you here. It's a bit nerve-wracking for you to sit in the background. I said, oh my God, would Pro like this? Anyway, so bear with me. I go through my slide. I've got a warm-up activity. So let me check that you see my presentation here. Yes or no? Okay, sorry, stop sharing. I share again. Do you see my presentation Pro here?
Yes, we're good.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So the warm-up exercise is, so usually we start with the big picture, the strategy, the why. But because last week I was in Budapest, so we changed the order. So I thought that maybe I share a few things that I learned in Budapest as a warm-up before we jump into the the course. So I noticed a number of things happening in Budapest, especially after COVID. So if you look at this picture, they have started to have a really nice network for cycling. So cyclists can go around the city of Budapest in a better way. So we have lots of separated bicycle lanes and some, mixed. But, one of the main changes is having cyclists and e-scooter riders on the footpaths with pedestrians. By doing this, they have been able to accommodate for cyclists, but they have created risk for pedestrians, especially tourists, elderly, and children. So they have solved the problem, but they had created some issues. I talked to a few engineers there, planners there, and they know what they're doing. They say, Hafez, we need to start somewhere. So it's just like the transition between having nothing, having more things, and grappling. If you go from this picture to this picture, this is also the very same scenario. Giving a problem to an engineer and want them to solve the problem, and they solve it for you. In this case, they had parking issues in this residential area in the city center of Budapest, and the engineer decided that, okay, I don't see many pedestrians. So what I do, I grab the land from pedestrians. I grab the footpath and use it for cars, and I'm pretty sure they're proud by their solution, but they haven't considered the latent demand. This is what, Pro, you have been talking about. What is the demand? What is the perception of the community? So let's go from that picture to this one. I really liked this one. So let me tell you the idea of sojourning. So when we design a place, an urban place, and by place we mean a place that people go to and live and love their life and do activities. So sojourning is about providing environment for people not only walk through and cycle through, but also stay. So these chair benches, I really like them. So these benches are like faced towards each other. People sit together, they smoke, which is bad habit, but they do, and they talk. So they have created urban places that people come in and stay. Okay, look at this one and these photos. What I see a lot, in many European cities is micromobility. So they not only drop the speed to 30K as seen here, they not only provide really nice parking spaces for e-scooters, but they also use them as sort of traffic calming measures as well. For example, in this local street intersection, they have used e-scooter and bicycle parks to narrow the space. So it's just like multiple use. My comment there was, oh my God, it's a human shield. And they said, oh, this is 30K, and we also have put this cushion here. So I was like torn. So I liked the idea. I didn't like the idea. Anyway, the other thing I saw a lot, not just one street, a lot, is using automatic bollards to close the roads. So lots of streets in the city center of Budapest are close to traffic, but they're open to emergency vehicles, to taxis, to public transport by using these automatic bollards that work with this system that is responsive to the cars. So you see how cyclists, pedestrians, e-scooter riders, micromobility are provided for in the city. But let's go back to our course, and I want you to take you through the helicopter view of designing for planning for pedestrians. So in essence, what we're trying to address here is, if somebody asks you to strategize for pedestrian crossings, in this case, race crossing, how you approach the task. So essentially, when you have enough money to do 10 of them, 20 of them, 50 of them, cover an area that can be a whole CBD, a whole CAD, Central Activity District, or a whole local government area, how you approach the task. So this is my endeavor here today. I'm gonna sort of help you to understand the background. So
Hafez,
yes.
just quickly, something that came up in the last course that we could keep in mind as well is there were some questions about how new developments contribute to race crossings and things. So when we're looking at, yes, we had some interest in that. So if we're looking at new developments, this is also really relevant for that. It's that, how do we theoretically plan the network? And if we've got major new subdivisions and things coming along, do you agree?
I love it. So, in this training, so I added a piece about my PhD, which we did predictive models for pedestrian crossing demands. And the reason we did that, because we didn't want to wait for developments to happen for us to know what happens with pedestrians. So using predictive models, we can actually foresee what happens in future if we do such and such about the road, about the public transport, about the land use, and then provide for them in advance. So it's like, Drew, you mentioned about harm minimization, harm elimination principle in your module. So how we do that? By predicting risk and preventing it before killing people. So I totally agree with you. Totally. Mm-hmm. Also, let me add to that, by strategizing for pedestrian crossings, what we mean is, like, we want to encourage you to do mass action. So not only just put one race crossing. As I mentioned, in the city of Budapest, for example, they have looked at a big area and they've planned for the whole city over 3, 4, 5 years. And it's taken so much effort, but they've done that because mass action is about area-wide solutions. It's not just one movement, it's the whole movement around your local government, for example. It is quite cost effective. So when you drop the speed, drop the risk, and provide amenity for pedestrians across a big area, it's way more cost efficient. Am I like striking a chord with what Prue said? Cost effectiveness is very important, and we can do that with mass action. So safe system compliance. So when you drop the speed across an area, because remember, crashes are random, risk is random. So there's an element of randomness that we need to cater for. And that's why when we drop the speed across the area, we cover that randomness. Crashes can crop anywhere. Business case for action. So when we develop mass actions, and by mass action, again, I mentioned that this is about dropping speed or providing amenity across a big area. It can be by providing, say, 10 race crossing across a sort of, neighborhood. We can develop a good business case because then you can have good justification for investment and convince your politicians, your councillors, your community to do action. It's about inclusivity and cohesiveness. Again, wider area, bigger community, covers everyone. And finally, it covers and synergizes with other concerns. Again, use Budapest, or I can use CBD of Melbourne. When we reduce the speed, we not only help safety, but we also save quality of life, social cohesion. We allow artists to come out and draw graffitis and all that. So we create an environment for life and placeness. Now, in this module, I'm going to cover a few things. So we're going to do a few exercises together to understand why walking is important, why we care about it. And then I'm going to talk about that strategic lens. I'm going to use a similar approach as what Prue did. We're going to give you 3 main principles that are going to guide your strategizing. So every time you're confused or you don't know what to do, think about the 3 principles and you should be good. And then we go through the strategic metrics that you can use in your development of business cases. We then do a quick practice together. What is the purpose of that last practice, which will take around 45 minutes? That's about me putting myself in your shoes, go through an area and strategize for race crossings, and then you critique my work based on what you have already learned in this module and in Prue and Bridget's module. It's going to be so much fun. You will see. Okay. Why walking is important? At least I see 5 departments. It's about economy, it's about environment, it's about health, it's about social cohesion, it's about transport system. So in terms of economy, we know more walking means more prosperity for your businesses, more money flowing in your area. It means that also by allowing more people walking, it has health and transport benefits, which means it brings down the society costs. In terms of environment, we know that it has an impact on sustainability, on air quality, on noise, and other aspects of environmental pollution. So that's important to notice. Also, it's good for our health and reduce diseases. It also is very important for interaction. Like many of the interactions I personally have during a daily basis, also because I'm potentially more extroverted than introverted, is going out, bumping into people, chatting to people on the street. Finally, it's about by allowing and providing for more walking and walkable communities, we can induce mode shift and also reduce this risk for pedestrians. Now, the first exercise, I want you to put the chat room other reasons for walking. What are the other sort of reasons or benefits of walking that I didn't mention in my 5 departments? Put in the chat room, we look at the chat room and we get it from there.
So the benefits of walking, is that right, Hafez?
Yep.
Yep, benefits of walking. We've got less traffic, good start. Manage stress, lovely.
It was me during COVID. All of us.
Quality time with friends and families. I had a colleague tell me that the days that she walks her child to school, normally they ride, but she just said the walking days are really special because it's the time when they have the most natural conversations. And ever since she said that, I've noticed that with my children as well. It's like the time when they're just in a completely different headspace and everything's very natural.
Oh, yes, and they cannot use their iPad or thing. So
Captive audience.
yes.
No need to find tab.
Yes. It's cost effective because you don't. I mean, I sold my car like almost 10 years ago. I live in more central area, so I have an excuse for not having a car, but it means that my household is a little bit, less costly. Connection with community. So let me bring up a few other things that I added here, which some of them, like coincide with what you said, and some of whatever you think that is an addition. So I said, the first one is very interesting. We did there's some research that shows that more walkable neighborhoods are actually having higher property value. So when we talk to our communities, sometimes it's important to tell them that, hey, more walkability means your value for your property. Also, it helps diversity and inclusiveness, as some of you mentioned here. It's also about arts and colorfulness of neighborhoods when we allow for more walking. It's also attracts more fun activities. And as you mentioned here, it's also about emotional health, emotional connection as well. So you remember that about inclusivity and diversity, we talked a lot, or Bridget talked a lot in the WHO module. Now, thank you for your contribution. Please keep it coming. We have a number of more exercises coming. So let's jump to Miro. And this one is I'm gonna turn the sort of question here and talk about the barriers against walking. What stops us not to walk? So I stop sharing and I jump to Miro. So let me see, how can I do that? No. Found it. I'm just back from holidays and my brain is just so I share it. Cool. So can you see my beautiful? So team, you remember the Miro exercise that you did in the last two modules. So here's the first action learning. I want you to think about yourself and your family and think about all the reasons or the factors that stop you from walking or walking more. And then when we have put our foot on the Miro board, I'll have another exercise for you.
Let me just. Yep, I'll sit rinse. Here we go. Just want to check everybody's found. Yep, everyone's in the right spot. If you're having any problems getting on the Miro board, I've put the link in the chat, and feel free, if you are having problems, to just write it in the chat and I can add it to the Miro board.
This is a great reason. My kids love cycling more than walking. Oh God, I totally identify with that. Some days.
My mum used to make us stop and look at every wildflower when we were bushwalking. It was just like, no.
Oh my God.
like
My mom doesn't have any annoying behaviors.
like
God.
it's so easy to drive.
So Prue, like I want to do an exercise with the team here. So
Yep.
usually like we do thematic analysis of these factors to understand what kind of major themes emerge from all these reasons. So what do you reckon? I want to ask the team like to separate the reason by dragging their sort of notes or to if you have talked about physical environment, facilities, bring the notes to the right-hand side of the Miro board. If you have talked about like individual, personal, emotional, non-physical factors, bring them to the left side. Let's see what happens. So physical on the right, non-physical to the left.
I love watching this happen.
Yeah. Because usually, so it's telling that we have a little bit more weight in the non-physical aspect of barriers. So that's my first observations. However, let's have a look at the physical information. So some of them are about like lack of facilities or disruption in facilities or having bottlenecks or disruptions. But some of it is about the type of journeys, the distance, the weather interference, the hilliness of the area. So you see, you can have an understanding. So by providing a more pervasive, more connected, more protected facilities, we can actually help to overcome that. Is there anything else, Prue, you think that you want to sort of highlight, bring out from the physical factors?
I think the one I want to bring out is lack of crossings.
How relevant.
I know, yeah. It's I was just looking and it's interesting. I do a lot of surveys with communities and there's kind of a bit of a theme. If there's no footpaths, you need footpaths. If there's footpaths, you need crossings. It's kind of this assumption that where the footpath hits the road, people can just safely cross. And most of the time people will seem to agree on where they need those things. So it's one of the important points. I think the other thing is that used to be a barrier when we were talking about improving infrastructure for children getting to school is that stranger danger was raised most commonly by engineers as an issue why children weren't riding to school. And so we survey specifically around that. And in every survey, road safety has come up as a bigger issue, why kids aren't walking or riding to school than stranger danger. But yeah, I think that's, just a couple of interesting things that have popped up in the work I've done. But yeah, this reflects what I've seen in the Queensland walking strategy as well. Shade is a really important one that is popping up again. But yeah, I think some of these things capture that as well, like insufficient infrastructure.
Yeah, maybe in a sort of agreeing with what you said, FHWA, Federal Highway Administration in the US, did a massive survey many years ago to understand what stops people from walking, and lack of safety came on the top, which is the next topic in my presentation and also coming out of in your sort of service, Prue, like again and again. So let's talk about non-physical. It's about, some of them are personal reasons. I don't have time. I really, really want to understand that more, but maybe personal conversation, how we cannot have more time for walking. Is about also sometimes it's like people say I'm busy, busyness or laziness. So again, all about that sort of aspect of having time, allocation of time. But I want to sort of say that it's also habit. like this is like what I've heard from my Dutch friends, because they are like, compelled to ride their bike every day, like through rain and shine, like they never question. They have now a habit that doesn't matter. There is no reason for them to stop riding. And they say, oh, I'm not made of sugar, so rain doesn't stop them. I'm not made of this, so nothing stops them. So I think it's also habit and education. Look at this here. It's easy to drive because it's like cars are more provided for. So if we provide for walking, that might address that. Speed and safety is one. Perception of safety. So actual and perceived safety is important, and also preference. Cool. I think, Prue, I get the big picture. Is there anything else you want to sort of, highlight?
I don't think so. I think there's a variety of reasons here. I think I've been involved in a strategy lately, and one of the things that we've commented on in this strategy is that as agencies, our job is not to force people to walk or ride their bikes, but to provide the infrastructure they need so they can if they want to. So I just think that's I think the more that we provide the good treatments, the good solutions in this physical environment, the more some of those things on the left side will possibly disappear,
I agree.
become smaller.
And I really like your democratic approach. So, so we talked about safety and lack of safety being sort of potentially a major stopper for walking. I want to give you an example, and this is a real case. Almost like 11 years ago, I was working for the Transport Accident Commission in Victoria, and in response to a parliamentary inquiry, we delved into 10 injury cases, claims that TAC was TAC is a sort of a governmental insurance that pays insurance for injured people in crashes. So we investigated 10 injuries. One of these injuries was about this, at the time, 32-year-old man that was, based on the information we collected from him, very upbeat, fit, social, like, having a family of 2 kids, and also an employer, like, having a sort of bricklaying business. So a very, so I would say good life, active life. And this person got involved in a crash. So one evening after work, when he brings out the family dog for a walk at an intersection, he is hit at 50 kilometers per hour in a 40K zone. And as a result of that crash, if I remember correctly, he had a dislocated sort of elbow, broken femur, like laceration, contusion, concussion, loss of blood, sort of caved in rib, like collapsed lung, one of the lungs was collapsed. So when we investigated the injury after in the hospital, he had 50% chance of getting killed at the crash scene. 50%. Toss of a coin, he would have been killed in his own neighborhood. Crazy. So he spent 42 days in hospital and outpatient as treatment. Over months, 42 days. In 2020s or 2010s, 40 days in hospital is massive. Is massive. Anyway, within 6 months, we did a longitudinal study. We went back to him and asked, how he was going. So he was depressed, anxious, had continuous pain, limited activity, and had to stop going to work, and had physical and emotional disturbances, nightmares, and all of that. Within 12 months, against all the support that TAC had given him. So this is not a third world country that people don't get any of that. So we're talking Australia. This person got financial support, like hospital support, physio support, psychologist support. Even against that, in 12 months, he was having suicidal thoughts. He was feeling disabled, limping, lost the business, started gambling, lost the marriage, I believe because of the crash, and had continued pain and suffering. So in this course, one of the main sort of messages to you is like that safety is not something theoretical, like something ethereal. It's very real. It crushes people's lives. And we try to stop that. Now, so yes.
I think just a little while ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Road Safety Week, and they talked about the deaths and serious injuries on the road each year. What shocked me was the number of serious injuries that happen on our roads each year. And I guess I'm fairly familiar at looking at, the mapping of where the crashes are happening and a little dot, and I even convert them into a little pedestrian to show all these pedestrian dots. But when you talk about this one person and the impact on their life, and then I think the stat I saw was 40,000.
Crazy.
It's incredible how this is happening. So I guess it's just about taking a moment to think of those, if anybody is involved in those crash stats, to think about this case study of just one of those case studies, and then think of one of those sites, the potential impacts, and then look at just how significant this issue is. And when people choose not to walk, if there's a decent chance of them being hit by a motor vehicle, then I don't think we can criticize them for not walking.
Exactly. And that's actually a really good point to say that lack of safety is such an important factor because of it's real and people feel it, especially for their loved ones, if you're a parent. So we need to do something about it. So Safe System teaches us how to sort of deal with this issue by a number of principles that will turn into practice. Prue has done a really good job in her module to talk about how to apply like Safe System in a more practical way. I just like I want to have a discussion about one of the points, but let me tell you the principles first. We are vulnerable. It takes us so much force, blunt force, to break, and we all break. It's like all flesh and bones. We are fallible, like without wanting or intentional, we make mistakes. We get distracted. We get sort of, have oversight, and so we need to remember that either driver or rider or pedestrian, we make mistakes. So environment should be protective, and also there is no reason we cannot eliminate this. So Prue talked about the harm elimination principle. That's at the core of the Safe System. And also as important is shared responsibility. Okay, I'll give you pre and after Safe System worldviews. Previously, we thought that if you make a mistake, you're a bloody idiot. You deserve to be hit by a car or whatever. It's the blunt language. So we put the blame on the road user, on the parent, on the kid, on the driver. After the Safe System, we say people make mistakes. Many of these mistakes are genuine, are not malicious. So the responsibility is on the government, on the road authority, who have money, who have planning, who have a strategy, who have all the tools and responsibility to make things different for the people. Now, let's stop here. Let's open the chat room. And the question for you here is, do you agree with this principle that the ultimate responsibility for safety is upon road authorities, or no? Yes or no? And then let's discuss, why yes or why no. And I open the chat room so I see what happens. Beautiful.
I think we should give a prize to Mo for coming out and starting that off, and his commitment. So I'll just.
Oh my God. I cannot stop myself but saying that, Mo works in my team. So I'm so proud of Mo. Go, Mo!
Go, Mo.
Let's go, Mo! Good on you. No, it is a shared responsibility. Callan, good. I think it's a shared responsibility, but level of sharing, let's discuss that. No, I think it's shared, Peter. No, I think we will have a responsibility. Cool. So I think let's talk about the shared responsibility aspect. So when we say shared responsibility, so what is the difference between ultimate responsibility and shared responsibility? I think they're the same. So we ask the road users to be law abiding, and that's the maximum thing that we can ask from them. We don't ask them to be perfect. make no mistakes, because that's not human. So when we say the ultimate responsibility is on road authorities, it's that we need to think, we need to strategize, we need to plan, we need to invest, and we need to act. What do I mean by act? So I'll give you an example. In Sweden, every road fatality, they sit down, members of police, justice, road authorities, universities, researchers, and discuss why this fatality occurred and what every member of the government can do to stop that fatality in future. So when I say the ultimate responsibility is with road authorities, is that kind of fatal crash investigation, which we don't do as rigorously in Australia and New Zealand. So I sort of disagree with people who said here it is a shared responsibility. Because if by shared responsibility is putting too much responsibility on the road user, that is not practical, that is not humanistic, and that is against our understanding of how a person, a road user, work. So again, politicians, government are really good at passing on the buck. We need to stop them. But thank you for sharing your thoughts here.
I think too, Hafez, I often go back to, and I was just quoting this morning, but Bridget talked a lot about safe, obvious, step-free. And so there's this regulatory environment of how we're supposed to behave, but as road designers and people managing the network, we need to do it in a way that it responds to humans' brains and intelligence. So yeah, it's safe, it's obvious, it's smooth and step-free, so that there aren't these barriers and very difficult kind of cognitive decisions and things as well.
Totally. And if I add to that, like you have a kid that we encourage to walk to school and the kid is 8 years old. Have we considered the emotional and cognitive capability of that kid in consideration when we're designing and planning? My contention is no. So it's not shared responsibility. It is our responsibility. So just put it out there. So quickly, like, Prue and Bridge has talked about, the description of race crossing, so I don't focus on here, but I would say the characteristics of a good race crossing is that it improves mobility and accessibility, it improves pedestrian safety, it creates better walking environment by visibility, human factor elements, and creating more specific environment for pedestrians. And also, again, as Prue have mentioned, it's cost effective as free flow and compatible with roundabout and other elements of the safe system. So these are some of the characteristics that a race crossing has. And also, as mentioned, the how part of the training course, which is the next part, will go very in detail into these elements. Now, a fun activity here, what do you call this? So when you look at this facility on the road, what is the name that comes to your mind? Tom says Wombat Crossing, Emily Pedestrian Crossing, and RPC. Yes. So one of it, like the reason I put here is just like, one observation. Yes. Oh God, that's there. I want one of those. So, one observation here, consistency. We have entities in Australia and New Zealand, like Austroads, that try to create authoritative, evidence-based, up-to-date, and harmonious standards, language, and guidance to be used. So it's very important for us to have consistent language. At the same time, we understand jurisdictional changes and circumstances, and also language can be different. So it was fun, but also an observation of consistency. This is one of those examples that, we can give prizes. The question is for a crew here. A proper race crossing reduces pedestrian fatal and serious injuries by what percentage? Patrice, you got the prize. That was, I look at this. I think 100% of people, like, Emily, you said 40, and I know you, and I know that you know a lot about this environment. So I would like to understand why you said 40. So Emily, if you can tell us why you said 40, I want to understand your thinking, please. And we give you 20 seconds to write your answer. So I'll just show the answer here is 70. And so while Emily is writing, he's coming. Good on you. So while you're doing that, so it is a very good solution, but it is not silver bullet. It doesn't stop all this. So we need to remember that a race crossing should be supported by other elements like speed management, and potentially because if someone speaks over it, it can still, yes, I totally agree. So that's exactly the thing I was talking about, Emily, here, that it should be supported by speed management. Just by itself, a race crossing is good, but needs support. True. I think that, yeah.
I'll go into this as someone who has just gone out to 40 different crossing sites and measured the ramp gradients with my trusty orange flashing light. Anyway, the ramp, there's a big variation in the ramp gradient. So the steeper the gradient, the more it will have an impact on vehicle speed. So what we're seeing out on site is a huge variation. Some of them have got piano keys marked on them, but they're not actually, they're hardly even raised, you know, one in 150 or something like that. So a raised crossing is not a raised crossing, but many of them, even with, you know, a small, even some of the ones that aren't that steep are still really effectively reducing speeds. In some environments, we're seeing, you know, a really significant reduction in speeds from the mid-block speed to the crossing speed just for the crossing. So this is what Ken will go into in a lot of detail about the different ramp gradients, but we're learning more all the time about how we can make them more effective, but also make it more feasible for them to get installed. Because if you do make the ramps too steep, then there's complaints and traffic engineers become reluctant to install them. So having good data and information about that is something we're working on at the moment, and it's evolving all the time.
Totally. And so if you wait for the module 4, Ken will give you the sort of, the details, engineering details that you need to put in for them to work, as effectively. So to answer the question here, what about a race crossing without zebra marking? Usually the zebra marking, when it's there, it's make it more visible and more understandable. So I think this 70% is with zebra crossing. So I have 15 minutes before, and this is like the strategic lens. So I go through this. Then we have a break. We come back to the final exercise. So I try to finish this part in 20 minutes. So think about yourself as a strategic planner in, say, a local government. So this is a map of a local government in Victoria. So imagine that you're sitting in your office, your manager comes to you and say, hey, look, I've got a grant of $150,000, $200,000, and I want to identify a number of locations across the LGA to install race crossing. I want them to eliminate harm, be cost effective, be practical, and at the same time provide for our pedestrians and our walkability. So how do you come up with a big map, a bigger strategy to address that question? So I think there are 3 key factors that we need to consider. So we need to think about the function and functionality of road and streets we're talking about. Not every road and street is amenable for race crossings, or some of them are amenable with some changes. Active traveler connection and demand should be considered. Again, creating a link between my module and Prue's module, that demand is important. How we capture it, how we quantify it, how we respect it. Also pedestrian safety risk, which is about the safe system and harm elimination and deaths and serious injuries. So these are the 3 key elements, cornerstones of strategic approach to a strategy for race crossing. I'm going to go deeper in each of these departments and give you examples and tools. And at the end of the 20 minutes, I'm going to give you, if you don't have access to any tools, I give you practical advice how to consider these. So if you didn't have any tools, you still have something to work on. Now, What does it all mean? When we talk about street and road function, it's about the road and street stereotypes across the whole system and what they imply for installing a race crossing. So it is important to understand which road and street stereotypes and functions are more amenable for race crossings. So that's important. But also it's about understanding the demand, the origin and destination of pedestrian trips, walking trips, and also remember about the latent demand. It's not just what is out there, what can be out there, what is frustrated. So remember the exercise we did about what stops you from walking. If I paraphrase that exercise, it means that there is a demand in you that is frustrated because of those factors. So, and also it's about risk, it's about understanding how actual and perceived the risk. Okay, let me create a differentiation. By actual risk is when you read in the newspaper at the intersection of blah, 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 a pedestrian is killed. That is actual risk. There's a risk there. The perceived risk is when you come to an intersection and you look at it and you say, oh, I don't want to cross here. Or I don't want my kid to cross here. So perception versus actual. And both of them are very important because we're human. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper. Strategically, road and street function is about movement and place. In Australia and New Zealand, we have different variation of movement and place functions and frameworks. And by movement and place function, we can look at every road and street and understand if they are for providing for movement, mobility of vehicles, or freight, or public transport, or cyclists, or pedestrians, or is a place function for sojourning, for accessing, for working, for dining, and all of those activities. And based on these two functions, we can understand where we're standing in the scheme of things and if a race crossing is justified or not. With demand, we can think about pedestrian networks. I'm going to talk about some tools how to forecast demand, but before doing that, if you have a pedestrian or principal pedestrian network planning in your local government or in your area, that helps you to understand where the main pedestrian trips are and what are the demands for future are. So that also helps you to understand which areas. For example, in this picture, they like, the darker the red, the higher the demand. So you can think about providing more facilities on those areas. But again, we need to think about the whole picture because sometimes these are based on current demand and they don't include latent. And risk trauma is about understanding where the risk is. And I will tell you how to estimate risk and not just rely on the history of crashes. Now, let's start with forecasting travel or pedestrian demand. And I want to rely on a really good work done in Queensland by the TMR. And one of them they've done, they identified several methods to forecast pedestrian demand. And these methods are going from simple comparison studies to very complex discrete choice and network models. I tell you what they are. You can see in your course, material, what these methods are in more detail, and you can use them. But let's introduce them one by one. So comparison studies is about using the current knowledge in your local government. If you have done similar projects, you know what the pedestrian demand is after, for example, doing a race crossing. So you can use that information for your current project to justify it. Sketch planning is about using spreadsheets that use land use information and translate it to pedestrian, walking demand. Direct demand models use regression models, predictive models to use the characteristics of the environment and turn them into numbers. I'm going to give you an example of my PhD, how I did that in my PhD. Spatial analysis use the predictive models using spatial models, and discrete choice and network model are more about the probability of trips. And these are more sort of, complex, but more accurate as well. So what are the pros and cons of these methods? So very simple. If we use comparison studies, you don't need much data, but they're not as accurate. If you use network models, they use lots of data and lots of time, but they're very accurate. So you need to use the demand of your project to choose the best model that suits. And it's also based on, the finance you have. That is why in a project I've recently done for Oxford, I recommended to them that these kind of data should be provided by the state or federal government, because local government doesn't have the money to do this. So now I give you two examples, one simple comparison study and one a little bit more difficult, which is like, predictive models for you to understand how we use this model. So the comparison, I use a factoring method, which is very simple. It says, count existing pedestrian, crossings or demand, and then factor them up with a factor after you have done a project or a facility. And then also you can identify what is the split between walking for transport or commuting or walking for recreation. So it's very simple. We use uplift factors. An uplift factor, it tells us, what is the increase in the number of pedestrians after introducing a feature to the road. And that talks about pre-existing demand for walking, mode diversion, like how many, like for example, like car drivers will jump on and walking, and also induced, like, the using the latent demand. So based on this information and comparable project in your area, you can come up with this uplift factor. I'll give you an example because examples are make it easier. So imagine that you have done a new pedestrian crossing at a mid-block location in a suburban residential area. Pre-construction counts tell us that, we did counts over 2 weekdays and 1 weekend, and we have 80 pedestrians a day crossing the road at this location. So using the data from similar projects, we know that when we do race crossing, they increase the number by almost 50%. So using that, we know that 80 initial pedestrian trips will become 118 after doing the race crossing, which means 14 more people will walk in this location. Also using the factors we have here, we can say that 80% of those trips are recreational, 28% are transport or work related. So very simple, very amenable. Now, I want to ramp it up a bit, and this is like my own PhD. For my own PhD, I focused on the CBD of Melbourne. I wanted to understand the risk for pedestrian crashes, but for calculating the risk, I needed to know exposure. In this case, the number of people who cross intersections or cross mid-blocks, for me to understand how many people are on the road who get involved in crashes. So to answer that questions, what I did, I identified the CBD of Melbourne. I identified all the intersection and mid-block in the CBD, and I developed a series of models to estimate the number of people crossing the road. So very simply, it was about a number of steps. So I sampled all the intersection and mid-blocks. I used some of the sample for collecting data and building the model, and I used the rest of the sample for validating the model. It's very important when we build a model for the model to be validated. So I went out, used information, and we collected pedestrian counts, used the pedestrian counts data and data collected for land use, for road, for public transport, and build model that told us the number of pedestrian crossing at each intersection and mid-block in the CBD, and is validated. Going back to what Prue said, these models can be used in any CBD and CAD area that has new development in Melbourne, which means that you don't have to wait for those CADs to be built to know the number of pedestrian crossings. You can know that in advance. There are some technical issues there. We need to cross-validate these models, but we can be sure that 80% accuracy is there. Now, what is the problem with this method? It's so data hungry. For my research, I used land use data, which is floor space and capacity for all the land use types. we had around 30 different land use types in the CBD that we had to collect data for. Look at this. We had public transport data, which is the number of stops, the number of accesses for buses, for trams, for trains. We need to collect that. Road geometry data, we need to know every road, their speed, traffic volume, number of lanes, mid-blocks, footpaths, all that information. And also socioeconomic information like number of jobs, population. So we put all of these factors in the model to reach around 80 to 90% accuracy. So the model was great, but it was very data hungry. Okay, now you understand demand. Let's move on and talk about safety. So I stop here. A reminder. Strategizing for pedestrian crossing is about three things: road and street function, movement and place, the demand, which is what we just discussed, and safety. Okay, safety. So when we talk about safety, you have two options, or more than two options, but let's talk about two options. The worst case is doing pedestrian heat maps. What does it mean? There are tools online. You can go there. You can just put in the geocoding or geolocation of your pedestrian crashes, and it produces heat map of the current pedestrian trauma. It is good, but it is not risk. Why? Because crashes are random. Unless you know the underlying reasons for crashes, relying on the history of crashes is not accurate. It is essential, but it is not accurate. What is the best case? The best case is using predictive geospatial regression model based on land use, transport, network, and exposure measures. So again, a bit costly and data hungry, but it produces a better understanding of this. Now, we did a research ourselves. This is a work we did for the Department of Transport in Victoria. And these are the 7 main methods for risk analysis used in Australia and New Zealand. So they are perception-based. We ask people where they see the risk are. This is an area that Prue and I have discussed a lot, how much reliance we can put on people's perception of safety. There's crash history. There is crash history FSI equivalence. It's about RAP models, which is OSRAP and IRAP models, and also it's about safety science and predictive models. So again, very similar to demand models, we start from simple and not much data hungry to complex, more accurate, but more data hungry and costly. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but all of these are documented, and if you want, you can reach out to me and I can give you more information how these are done. But I'm going to talk about the RAP models, which are more accessible currently in Australia and New Zealand. Oh, before I move on, based on our analyses, these 4 methods are more statistically significant and robust, which means that we can validate the results and they actually show risk. Now, what is the RAP model? So RAP is the Road Assessment Program. Road Assessment Program is about risk management, and it's also about, let me move on. I can give you more information here. So RAP model uses the characteristics of the environment and use predictive models to spit out a star rating risk for each road and street function. So for example, for pedestrians, the RAP model tells you if you don't have any sidewalks or safe crossing and the speed is high, it is a very high risk environment. If you have sidewalk present, signalized crossing with refuge and it's 40K, it is a safe environment. Let me stop here. RAP is an okay method. It's not perfect because right away, 40K is not safe for kids and the elderly. We need at least 30. And if we have more engaged environment, we need 10K. So we need to remember that RAP is a good transition from the current situation to better situation, but is not the end result. But it's available. It is becoming more accessible. So why not using it? Now, let me stop here. So people usually ask me, Hafez, oh, Prue.
We have a question. I don't know if you want to answer it now or coming up, but what data can be used for new greenfield developments to identify a need for crossings?
Ava, what we can use is we can look at the land use and speed and traffic volumes and other elements of demand. Depending on the availability of those data, we can either build model or use existing model for similar situation to predict or forecast crossings. But it really depends on what data you have and how in depth you want to go. So it really depends.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's okay. I'll just put some other stuff in the chat as well, if you like, because I think we'll keep going.
Please. So practical advice is about when people ask me, Hafez, I don't have these tools. I cannot get all of these data. Some of these are geospatially available, but I don't have resources or time to build these models. So what is the practical advice for me? So for the rest of this course, I'm going to give you practical advice and use just more practical knowledge and experience to solve the problem. So let me give you some advice here. For movement and place, you need to do a few elements. So you survey the community's activities and detect high activity areas and zones and streets like shopping strips. Then you focus on narrower, lower speed and less traffic environment and avoid high speed environment. If you do these three things, you are more likely to end up with environments that are more amenable for race crossing. A note, if you don't have such an environment, you can create it maybe. So how does it work? So for example, you have a 60K environment. What you can do, you can drop the speed temporarily and around a a school crossing, put cushions on the road, speed manage, and provide a crossing. So you still can provide them while you need to change the environment. So with pedestrian network, if you don't have those complex demand models, again, you survey the community destinations, you talk about residential, educational, commercial, health and tourist attractions, you identify those, you count pedestrians. This is the most basic things. You go out 2 or 3 days or send the students and they collect data for you. And you use that information to identify high demand. This is again, note, this is not precise because you forget about latent demand and there's a risk of mistakes and errors. But hey, this is good enough if you don't have the resources. With road trauma, we have less and less excuses because currently many of the states provide crash and injury data online in geospatial shape files. You only need to have access to some of these. And if you don't, still you can reach out to your state department and get risk maps. So you will have a better understanding of where the risks are. Again, going back to what Prue has discussed, we need to consider perceived as well. So remember that. Now, Prue, we are 5 minutes behind, but I think we're going really well. Let's have a 5-minute break and come back for the rest of the course. Okay, so I stop sharing.
Yes, and so 11:10 we'll be back.
Beautiful.
Oh.
Great. Thank you, Loretta. So Prue, I cannot see you. I don't know why. Yes.
That's because I thought I'd press the button and I hadn't.
Beautiful. So I think we will go back to Tom, I think, to give this potentially what is the approval process for priority crossings. So thank you, Tom, question noted. So let's jump to talk about business case development and then an exercise for strategic approach to race crossing planning. But before doing that, I want to have a reminder that it's very important to think about mass action planning for race crossing, not just one crossing. If I use Tom's question here, when you're going through lots of hoops and loops for getting approval for your race crossing. It's better to get approval for 10 of them, 15 of them, rather than one. So let's talk about first, what are the strategic metrics that we can use to justify race crossings at the sort of mass action level. These are about, if we need to show that the value for investment for government to invest money in these. It's about developing convincing business cases. For example, if you use the elements of road and street function, travel demand, and safety, you're more likely to develop a convincing business case. It's also about synergizing with other societal concerns. For example, you can link your business case to quality of life, environmental pollution, or social inclusion, or decarbonization, or other sort of elements of the other societal concerns. And also, when you have a business case, it allows you to better monitor and evaluate your investments. So it's very important to think about that. One point of note here is sometimes we don't have all the data to develop business cases. One of the issues with active travel, because data for cars and mobility for private vehicles is way more established in the system and way more available. So usually developing business cases for mobility is way easier, and they can show benefits cost ratios way easier. So sometimes be careful when you're developing a business case. If it's competitive with cars, you might lose, not because your case is not strong, because we don't have enough data to quantitatively justify investment in active travel. So just keep that in mind. Now, so this is a really good case. I like this. Is based on UK's economic case for action for active travel. So what they've done, they identified several elements that they have collected data about noise, air quality, like journey quality, physical activity, and they have monetized the impact of active travel on all of these. So if I put a number of pointers here, they know the value of decongestion, for example, based on encouraging active travel and how much it is. Based on that, they have developed a business cost ratio, or a BCR, for active travel, which is around 5.5, which is great. So this case in the UK shows that if you spend $1 on active travel, you save $5.5 or pounds here for your society. Great. But when you think about those business cases, usually several elements are not properly monetized or quantitatively monetized, which is very important to note. For example, the growth in businesses, increase in property values, or sometimes the cost in household and transport, investment in car infrastructure and their maintenance, mental health, social cohesion, social inclusion, you name it. Many of these factors are not fully, or even sometimes at all, monetized. So that is a problem that we need to consider. However, in Australia and New Zealand, we have started to sort of sometimes monetize this. This case I really like. This comes from Auckland and their cycling investment. So in this infographic, they have shown that how much benefit for the society we can create with more cycling. For example, they showed that by investing $1 in cycling, you're going to create $2 to $4 benefit in the society. So it's great. So because it talks about the space allocation on the road, so it shows that cycling saves space on the road. It's about less pollution, shows how much tons in pollutions you can save. It's about saving injuries, health costs, and household costs. So there are some activities and sort of examples in Australia, New Zealand, and internationally that we can use. So you can look out for them. You can reach out to me if you want, and I can give you more examples how we have monetized active travel and pedestrian and walkability for your business case usage. Now, before moving on, I want to do an exercise with you. So if we Emily says, I would love to see some research on the cost of forced car ownership to households. Do we have data source behind these metrics? Yes, Emily, so I would come back to you. So we'll give you the research to you. So question noted. So let me stop sharing and we jump to Miro for the next exercise. It's here. Beautiful. So the next exercise is about your case. So it is very important for us to understand where you come from. Like, why are you attending this course? Like, are you developing a project, or are you developing a program? Are you writing a business case? Is it for your self-development? Why are you attending this course? So we can actually use that to understand how we can provide better information to you.
Faiz, I really liked your comment before about it being relevant what data is available. Like, I think it's often when we're planning for walking, for cycling, for crossings, we have these really limited data sets and data available, and it's so making your decisions based on the best data you've got available, and it might be strategic data, it might be locally collected data. It's about using what you've got to provide a trail of logic to justify the investment and things. And often some of the barriers that I come up with, like, to getting crossings in can, they might be that there's not enough evidence for practitioners to support it. So, that's when we've gone back and got some more evidence and data and things. But I just think it's kind of coming through as a theme that we need to be versatile and adaptable to use the data that we have at our disposal.
I totally agree with you. So we recently did a project for Austria. I mean, we're actually doing it at the moment as well. It's called Keeping People Safe When Walking. You can Google it. Keeping People Safe When Walking. This is an Austria's project. One of the many findings of the project is that the majority of practitioners not even know the available data. So there are so much data available that are freely available through like open data sets online. And when we research and did focus groups, people don't know they exist. So first step, teach practitioners what data is available. Second step is like, if there's something missing, let's help them to get the data. So I think I totally agree with you, and there are steps. Cool. So it's great. So we have lots of interest here. So what I want to do here, let's do this exercise. So if what you're here for is more strategic, bring your note to the right side. It is more about project operation, doing it now, bring it to the left. So more strategic to the right, less strategic to the left. And see what happens. Okay, cool. There's some in the middle. Beautiful. Beautiful. So cool. I think that, it is a great mix. We have a little bit more a weight in the more strategic side. It's about advocacy. It's about inclusion of race crossing in safe system assessments. It's about safe route to schools, self-development, developing business cases, assessing new developments. Great. And also in the project side, it's about designing for them, appropriate use of them, processes, planning developments. Great. So good, I have a better understanding now. Let's move on and do the next exercise. But before the next exercise, I want to give you some information. So we talked about the movement and place framework. And we said that it's very important to understand the movement and place framework. So I'm using the New Zealand version of movement and place, which talks about the place function versus the movement function. again, as a reminder, place is about where we do our life, working, having fun, dining out, education, and all that. Movement is about when we move from A to B, we really want to go, we don't want to stop and sojourn, it's just about moving. So when we look at urban and rural environment, we can dissect the whole system into place and movement. And we have certain sort of categories of roads. For example, a city hub is a place of very high density offices and residential tower blocks. It is a central city shopping mall. It is a central business precinct. At the same time, a transit corridor is a transit corridor where you have freight, high number of traffic, moving between major cities and major travel attractions. So we have these different sort of situations. Now, many of you are familiar with movement and place, so I'm not going to sort of, take more time here, but we have an exercise. The exercise is about understanding where we can put race crossing across the movement and place framework. So let me share my mirror with you and we do this exercise together. So what I want you to do is grab a smiley face, a note or something, or draw and tell me which part of the movement and place framework you think we can put race crossings. For your reminder, I put the definition of each category on the right-hand side, and you can use that to identify. So, cool, like we have the first answer. It says on the main streets we can put race crossing. That's great. You can use the graphic itself. You can point out where in the graphic you think we can put race crossing as well. Awesome. So we have main street activity, local streets, certainly we can do that. Fantastic. Cool. We have more and more people like identifying local streets. Certainly civic spaces also important. So the theme that is emerging that the higher the place function, the more likelihood of having race crossings. That's correct. Somebody pointed out to urban connectors. We need to discuss that because that is a high speed environment around 80K. I wouldn't put a pedestrian in front of cars there. So great. So let me sort of quickly analyze this. So local streets 100%, civic spaces 100%, main streets and city hubs 100%. The only controversial area is sort of, in the middle when you have thousands of kilometers of 50 and 60K roads that sometimes are too wide. So yes, we can put race crossing on them, but as we discussed, we need to change the environment. Potentially, if you can temporarily reduce the width of the road, reduce the speed, maybe add some lighting, then a race crossing will work really nicely. Again, let me create a connection between what Prue said. Remember, we talked about like buses, public transport stops. Some of these public transport stops on arterial roads. Yes, we can put a race crossing next to them, but we need to do some changes. So the answer is yes. So thank you very much. Great responses. So for the rest of the course, you're going to do something that is a bit uncommon in Yes.
You might just stop for a second. Just there's a comment here from Emily about raising an interesting issue that transit corridors and urban connectors end up creating massive barriers. So I think we kind of talked about that in terms of changing the speed environment, making the environment suitable to install a raised crossing on, or even in last sessions. The last session, we went through some of the rules about raised crossings, and where we can't provide a raised pedestrian crossing, they're great because they're cheaper and they're really effective, but a raised signalized crossing can work into that higher speed environment as well. But it's certainly the theme that's coming up in movement and place and things, that just because it's a movement corridor doesn't mean that we're not providing safe access for pedestrians to get across the road, to get to bus stops and things. It's just that there's that kind of ceiling where our raised crossings come out, and that's why we need to think really carefully about when we have urban areas with speeds higher than 60 k's an hour or 50, then our crossing options just kind of plummet off a cliff until we get to grade separation, potentially. I think I just took over that question, sorry.
Also, like Prue, like, traditionally, like, we were taught as engineers that, in those cases, do the separation, like, grade separation. Yep. But practice showed us, first, they're costly. Certainly, we need to consider a lot of things for grade separation. So we need to consider if we have to, but if we can find with other solutions as well. But again, I would be very thoughtful to put a pedestrian in an environment that is high speed.
Yeah. So, but and I think one of the things that we learned, or I've certainly learned through my projects, is the first challenge is actually making a really compelling case that you need a crossing there, because when you get to those higher speed environments, that's where the dollars just go up to actually find a suitable facility. And that's where getting that data to say this is needed, or in a lot of the projects I've worked on, it's data that says this refuge is not good enough, it's not safe enough from community perspective, safe system. So what are we going to do instead to provide a safe facility that's consistent with our guidance and meets people's needs?
Exactly. And also, like, a comment here, and I really identify with that this issue is massive in rural Australia and New Zealand. So one of the things that, we can comment on is using technology. So there are examples that we can use technology for detecting pedestrians or pedestrian demand and dropping the speed on the road based on that demand, which is like, also like really sometimes desirable for drivers because they know that their speed is not going to reduce for no reason. So we can find solutions, but again, an area that, I would be looking at each case very specifically to make a decision. Now, as I said, for the rest of this module, we're gonna do something a bit different. So I'm gonna take responsibility and develop a plan for an area in Melbourne. You sit back and do critique. So I'm going to go all through the steps of road and street function, travel demand, pedestrian demand, and safety, and use them to show you how practically and with using no tools, I can develop a strategy for an area. I want you to criticize me. I want you to, at the end of the exercise, mentor me. How could I have done a better job? So what I want you to use, first, the knowledge we have discussed today in this module, but also very importantly, use what Prue has told you and what Bridget has told you. So these are all applicable and you can use them to improve what I've done here. So let us start. So my manager comes to me and says, Hafez, I want to develop an exercise for you to first have a better empathy for the job of strategizing for walking. I want you to sort of, do observation, understand, how you can improve this, and also sort of, conceive how to develop a mass action plan for pedestrians. So the exercise is that we are in Melbourne. We are around 15, 20 k's out of the CBD of Melbourne in Caulfield area. We're around the Caulfield railway station, which is a major railway station in sort of in that part of Melbourne. We're talking about an area around a golf course, around Monash University campus. We have a shopping district, we have schools, we have community centers. We have a sort of, suburban area, and I want you to go around and identify sort of, opportunities to put race crossing. It's very similar to the Bly examples, but we're using more strategic tools in this case. Now, so what I did to do this exercise, so I thought that, okay, I'm going to use a local primary school and walk from that primary school back and forth to the railway station. I imagine that I'm a school children. It's around, say, 1.5 kilometers, 1.2 kilometers. I walk it, and then I use my observations to develop my strategy. So what I saw on the way. So this is the route I chose from the primary school, going through local streets, another local street, go to more arterial, cross a big intersection, go to the drive, like Sir John Monash Drive, around Monash campus, Monash University campus, and go to the station. On the way, I took photos. So what I saw is like, a local street, like posted 40K, and then more sort of arterial sort of, streets with a shopping street with like tram tracks, more traffic. And then again, a little bit more high speed environment and less residential. And then I didn't take a picture of the major intersection, but after the major intersection, you have the, like, this, the Sir John Monash Drive, and then a crossing and a railway station. So this is what I saw on the way. Now, I wanted to use the lenses that we talked about. What I did, I looked at the function of roads and streets on the way. So the first one is like mainly local streets. Then we're talking about activity streets using the movement and place function. Then the connector roads, then transition to a city hub. So we have 5 different environments at the very least. Now, then I look at the demand for walking. So I didn't have any sort of information, but I thought that I look at the attraction sort of, or pedestrian trip or walking trip distributors, or like, or originators, if you will. So what I saw on the way is I saw a station, university campus, a shopping sort of, mall, and a restaurant near the station. I saw university, some residentials, then tram stops, shops, restaurants, and residentials, and schools, churches, community centers, and residential areas. So these are this type of sort of, trip generators I saw on the way. Now, in terms of crash history, I went online and I got the map of crashes, and the map of crashes was something like this, and the blue dots are current casualty crashes that we see on the road. However, when I was walking, I used my sort of, safe system auditor and like road safety auditor, like, experience, and I identified potential risk areas as well that needs to be treated. So I had that as well. So based on this, I also looked at the current pedestrian crossing, sort of a race crossing along the way. So I identified 3-4 of them on the way. So 2 of them are closer to the school. 1 of them is on a local street near to the church, and a sort of, another school there, and also 1 near to the station. Now, before we do the mentoring, in this case, when I came back to my manager, I sort of, use this information to identify a number of race crossing near to the community centers and where I had identified crash locations. So this took me potentially 2-3 days and 2-3 days of, desktop. So what I want you to do now is like understanding what could have been done more. Obviously, I have left some gaps there for you, but let me stop sharing and we jump to the Menti. Prue, you have a question?
No.
Okay.
I'm just literally jumping because you said jump. So I'm like, yep, I'll do my jump.
Yes, I really love the way that you're active. You're standing and you're sitting and you're jumping. So the exercise or action learning here is about think about what I've done, the steps I've taken, the data I have collected, and the sort of recommendations I've come up with, and tell me what I have missed. Information from today, information from Prue and Bridget modules, and tell me what I have not done properly. Or if I've done something properly, you can tell us as well. This is actually my favorite exercise in this module. I noticed that one of the comments sounds like Prue, and then I noticed that Prue is writing it.
And then I put a smiley face on it as well.
Awesome. I love it.
Oh, it seems to have come up as a theme. I think that's good. It was certainly a strong theme.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Okay. So I give like the team another sort of half a minute, and just I'm going to give you a few pointers here. How could I consider the road and street function better? How could I have identified the pedestrian and walking demand better? How could I have identified safety factors better? How could I come up with better communication and engagement plans? What about data? What about finances? What about existing strategies? What about existing societal concerns? What about the needs of different segments of the community? So think variety of things, and I would like to see, like, how could I have done, or how could you do a better job? So think.
There's an interesting one there where it says, did we consider budgeting? And we discussed in the last session, it was kind of a new question where I asked people how many raised crossings. If I had enough money for one signalized crossing, how many raised crossings could I install for that money? And it will be different depending on your jurisdiction and the guidance and the cost of developing things at the moment. In my area, I think it's somewhere between, you could get 3 or 4 raised pedestrian crossings for one signalized crossing. And we kind of had from the group range between 3 and 5, I think. So I think when we have these questions about budgeting, and it's one of the things that we consider in terms of getting low cost treatments, we can see there's a number of sites that need to be treated in your network. And that's one of the reasons we're kind of providing more information about the raised crossing facility, because it's something that can meet a whole lot of those different criteria, in terms of a low cost first child treatment. Anyway.
Yeah. And I would add, like, how many raised crossing we can get for a lane duplication. So let's do some thematic analyses. What I want you to do, we talked about communication and engagement. So let's move all your comments about communication and engagement to the right-hand side of the screen. So please move your comments that are not related to the other side. We talk about them later. All the communication and engagement comment to the right-hand side of the screen. Let's see what is there. And if there is a comment from you that is not related to comms and engagement and is sitting on the right-hand side, please move it to the left-hand side. So the comments are about, did you have surveys of existing users in the area? Very relevant question. Did you consult with the community in the schools? Again, very relevant. Connect with the local councils to get their understanding of the area. Hypothetically, I was a part of the council, but totally relevant question. Undertake targeted community engagement at schools, businesses, community centers. ask the community, did you engage with the schools to find out how many students were doing that, asking the school community, teachers, students, parents to map their desired lines and routes, engaging with community, future use of area, again, really good planning question, I love that. Posted speeds. So posted speeds of roads is not community communication engagement. We move it to the left-hand side, please. Did you ask the local government relevant survey count at signals? That is also not about communication and engagement. Did you get the AT data? Also data is about not communication and it can be used in communication and engagement, but it's about data. Now, so let me bring out a few things here. It's about understanding the segments of the community that are impacted by our plans. So no, I didn't. And that's some of the maybe major failures in my plan, that I didn't talk to different segments of the community, schools, community centers, businesses. But also, I should have put myself, if I use Bridget's language, in the shoes of a kid, an elderly, a person with vision impairment, a person with temporary, disability or permanent disability, or variety of use, or tourist. So by doing that, we can identify more gaps and develop more inclusive plans. Cool. Another thing, more and more we realize not having a communication and a stakeholder engagement plan is why we fail. You don't need to develop a War and Peace document for communication and engagement. Just do these steps. Identify your target audience, as you have mentioned here. Identify the major questions to ask them and your major messages to deliver with them. Identify methods of engagement and do it. So it can be a little bit costly sometimes if you are talking about loss of engagement and loss of audiences and community segments. So we need to sort of tailor that to match your budgets, but still doing something is better than doing nothing. I stop here. I want to bring in Prue. Prue, what is your experience in this area that you can share with us?
I think with the community engagement things, I think there's a perception that it's really difficult and complicated, and I think it is when it can be, but there's also some really efficient ways of doing community engagement and effective ways. We talk a bit about tapping into a community of interest, and I've done it in a couple of communities where we engage heavily with a school community, and then we ask them if they want to share their surveys to other community groups. They're more than welcome. And what we found is by doing that, the school communities have these really strong community of interest around them. They've got really good communication channels. Doesn't take much effort from us in terms of pushing and trying to gather community input, because this audience is already quite engaged on the issue. People are often concerned about their children. So that's a really good place to focus. So what I usually do is tap in and say, where are the schools? Because I know that engagement will be easy through them. And do that, and then also kind of just have supporting and backup so that they can share it. If there's people that can't do the survey, Bridget talked about making sure that you have a phone number there so people can call in to make sure we're capturing everybody's needs as well. So I think, just as we're pushing the boundaries with engineering and how we can solve these problems of getting people across roads, we're also doing the same with our new methods and tools with community consultation and engagement to get it easier and quicker, and just a standard part of, collecting data for these projects. And I think the other thing that can be really good about the data is what I've found is that it actually carries the projects through, because we have this great evidence base that we're basing our decisions on. So when you go to apply for a grant to get your project built, you produce the map that shows this is the most important place for a community, or if developers are coming into the town, like in one of our scenarios, you know, we say, actually, we don't just need a channelized turn lane here, we need a crossing. This is the number one site in town where people want a crossing. So, yeah, I think it's a space that with some of our tools and things and more electronic communities and options and, you know, that we've got more options and actually those things are getting easier.
Totally. And also, like what you mentioned, Pro, talks to a couple of comments here. People ask me, have you talked to the local government? Have you talked to the local schools? Have you talked to the local experts? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's not about more money, it's about accessing to what is already there, as you mentioned. So no, thank you very much for that. So great. So what we want to do now, please like grab all your notes and let's empty the left-hand side. We want to go through the next exercise. So let's grab all our notes from the left-hand side, move it, right-hand side, and put it to the left-hand side. So we create an empty area in the right hand. And what I want you to do with that space is any comments about road and street function, any comment about movement and place, road and street function, please grab them and bring them to the right-hand side. Any comments about road, street type, functions, and movement and place, bring them there and see what happens. Cool. So awesome. So a really quick observation. So this is actually an area that we haven't received so much comments, and there are so many gaps in my approach. So what I want you to consider is it's very important to have a better understanding of the typical stereotypes of the road that you can provide race crossing for. So it is about understanding our freight network, cycling network, pedestrian network, and then where movement is and where place is. So I would encourage you all to gain a better understanding of the movement and place framework in your area and your jurisdiction, your state, and that will help us to justify more race crossings. But now let's have a look at the existing comments. So what is the strategic planning is proposed for the area? Great point. We need to look at the current strategies in place in the area. That strategy might be integration, integrated transport strategies. It can be safety strategy. It can be even car park strategy or pedestrian cycling strategy. So the first thing I should have done is looking at those strategies and action plan. Is there anything else I can use? Very good comment. Did you consider where crossing can be located, near intersection or mid-blocks? Where? So again, very good and relevant comment. I need to look at the current stereotypes and understand which part, mid-block or intersection is better situated for a race crossing. Or I would add roundabouts. Sometimes roundabouts are a great location for adding race crossings. We talk about the speeds, very important as a part of road and street function and also safety. We discuss technical issues of creating ped crossings, maybe not race, where there are tram tracks and other sort of, tram stops. Again, very relevant comment. Sometimes we have, issues against installing race crossings. Ken will be talking about this matter in more detail, where and where not we can put race crossings. Great comment. Did you get the AT data for footpaths, shared paths, and other sort of, data? So that is more relevant to demand, but can be related to a street function as well, but it's more demand. PT routes, very relevant comment. So when we look at the function, we need to look at the function of public transport, freight, cyclists, and pedestrians, and that's what your movement and place functions are. Attempt the route yourself using the wheelchair. Great point. Also, the posted speed of 80k, 80 or 85 percentile speeds. That's also related to safety as well. Great point. Use heat maps to see where people are walking and so on. That's again travel demand. Cool. So I think observation, we need to think about the function a little bit more. Now, let's do safety. So let's remove all our notes to the left-hand side and bring the safety comments to the right-hand side and see what we can get from this. Very important, speed. Major factor. So team, what I'm asking is, think about your comments, and if your comment is related to safety, you yourself need to drag your note to the right-hand side. So, like, it is your exercise, think about your comment. If it's related to safety, drag it to the right-hand side. I don't know what CPTED is. Yeah.
That would be CPTED. What was the question? I'm just trying to.
CPTED report. Yeah. FSI data, active travel data for food pass. So again, so this is an area that I would have liked to see more comments. Observation here is usually in developing a strategy for pedestrians, we don't include safety as much. So in the course today, we talked about all the different tools you have in your disposal to identify risk, assess risk, and identify high-risk location that needs care for pedestrians. I acknowledge that you talked about the speed and some of the data, but I would have loved you to talk about the systemic assessment of safety, safe system approach to safety assessment, using safety tools and safety data, and focusing on risk. So these are the 5 key points that I would have loved you to mention. So think about it. I would like you to in future to consider them as well. So what I want to do in the next exercise, and so these are like some of the solutions that we can put in combination with race crossing. 30 km/h, putting race crossing on side streets, putting crossing on local streets, treating signals intersections, traffic calming using physical changes like chicanes, like narrowing down the roads or road closures, and traffic calming using technology, for example, those speed display signs, and using better data and information. So in this last exercise, and this is the last exercise, after this we'll be moving to through and finishing the module. So last exercise. What could have been done more to provide for pedestrians? I want to think about pedestrian solutions that comes to your mind to improve the pedestrian safety in the area, or pedestrian mobility, walkability. And Prue, because this is the last exercise and the team are quite tired.
Yes.
The best answer will get a prize.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you will be the judge. Whoever you say is the best, you will be the judge. I don't want to be the judge.
What more could have been done? Remove, reduce.
Even if I love the answer, all of the above, that's
looking at some of the headings here, there's one of the things we used to have guidance, or I think there still is guidance that talks about traffic calming and not connecting a footpath to a traffic calming device like a raised platform, because if you do that, then people will assume they've got priority, and we in Australia we don't recommend that. They do have courtesy crossings in New Zealand, but it's interesting, whenever there's traffic calming popping up, I always look at it as an opportunity to include the pedestrian crossings with the traffic calming. It's like, this is the place in the network where we've got the speeds the absolute lowest. So great opportunity to use crossings and do two things at once.
Yeah, totally. And also that goes back to Emily's comment earlier, that we need to do whatever we can do to reduce the speed on raised crossings, and traffic calming does it.
Well, this is exciting. I like reading these.
Yeah, but also, like, I see lots of notes open, but no, people are writing.
Yeah. Active and monitors for approaching traffic.
Oh, I see Bridget here, the step-free access.
Now, I was at a raised crossing the other day, one of these site surveys, and I was talking to someone in a mobility scooter, moped, we've got all different names for them. And he was saying that they really like the new crossing. Sometimes when they go down curb ramps, it shakes the battery in their mobility scooter and they're stuck. And that to me sounds terrifying, because they're, you might have already been trying to judge a safe gap in traffic. So providing this flat, continuous surface gets rid of that risk as well.
Yeah, and also a few years back, Victoria Walks commented on that as well, that dip is not, like, the easiest for the elderly to handle. So
yeah,
totally. Oh my God, the Dutch now have a streets where the car is a guest and the street is completely traffic calmed. I don't, I would, the easiest would be moving to the Netherlands already, but we don't. We want to bring Netherlands here. Cool, Prue.
Okay, that's okay. I'm going to be unashamedly, biased and go for the.
Yeah, be biased. You're human.
In this, so I really like this one about development of the available legislations and obligations for developers and councils with clear guidance for implementation of pedestrian paths and cycleway provisions and funding. I think that's a nice one, because I think it's taking us up that we're going to be applying the learnings that we learn in this course, which can apply to our brownfield sites, our greenfield sites, being strategic about where we put our crossings in, the safety benefits of them. And ideally, we want someone else to be paying for them, and that our new areas are being built with this stuff ingrained in it. So I think there's enough knowledge we have now to start updating planning schemes in Queensland. We're at that phase where people are starting to update their planning schemes. And if we get that right, we can, we can take the focus off having to fix up new areas, because they can be being built to this standard. If we know how important these kind of facilities are to, our inclusiveness and who and why and where we should be putting them, then hopefully we can be doing that as well and getting it as part of new development. So whoever did this one in the top corner, did you see that?
I love it.
I drew a circle. I've never done that before.
What I also like about this is just how thorough and self-contained and well thought of this comment is. It just comes from obviously lots of thinking, practicing in the area, and understanding what are the barriers and gaps are, as you mentioned. Can I also have a number of honorable mentions?
Definitely.
So I really like a couple of comments that talk about using technology, be it speed humps that are responsive to the weight of vehicles or the presence of vehicle, or pedestrian activated warning signage or speed signs. Also, I want to mention like the step-free access, which talks about inclusivity, and also all the comments about human factors, behavior change, communication and engagement. I also love them. but I totally agree that solution is very complete, very thorough, and very convincing. So whoever said that,
Can you let us know in the chat, please, who did the top right one with the green circle around it?
I'm really curious to know who that person is. Yeah, the question is like, who is the person that made that comment on the right-hand side that threw the circle around? That was me. Ah, Callan.
Kellen.
Perfect.
Kellen,
Awesome.
you
So
have a prize. Yeah. And sorry, we'll read this as well.
awesome. So having said that, Prue, I just pass on to you to conclude the module.
Thank you so much, Hafez. I particularly loved a couple of those questions, but really hearing about what people were, what the kinds of problems they were working on, and we're over time, so I better close it up. But just really quickly, we talked in the last session about continuing those networks. Reach out to us. Having a good network of other people who are working on these kind of problems is, in my experience, it's really important to solving them. You'll get to tricky bits, and reaching out to your networks and talking to other people about how you can solve them, do that, because that will get you through. Just knowing the Wombat people here has really helped me out and builds your knowledge. So thank you so much for all your participation today. There's some amazing Miro boards. Thank you so much, Hafez. That was a great session. And next week, or the next session on Friday, will be with Ken Beer. So I've noted a couple of questions that we'll pass over to that one. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for your time, passion, and participation.